Okay, so we're getting ready to load up a new installer. It's going to be his first customer building for the day. He's built some sheds here at our factory, and now I'm going to go out on site with him, basically to be there for support as well as to certify him. And right now what we're doing, we're just going to go through the checklist and make sure we got everything on the kit, and then we will strap it down, and then we're gonna go ahead and contact the customer to let them know that we're on the way. All right, I'll be back in a minute. Okay, so we made it to the site. We greeted the customer and we found the location where we're going to be putting the shed. So I'm just going to take a walk back and show you where we're going to put the shed. Just starting to bring back all the pieces. So we're laying out the steel frame for the floor. And on this building, for the customer's HOA, we got to make sure that we keep the shed in even with the house, or actually in a little bit, so it can't be seen from the street level. So we're going to go ahead and get this floor frame screwed up, and then I will be back in a minute. Okay, so one of the first things I train the installers to do when they get on site is, while one guy is go ahead and getting the floor frame set up, to come over, you have another guy come over and set up the trim and the sidewall leaves on a set of sawhorses. And we have a tarp down below so we don't get any paint on the grass. But as you can see, these edges painted in the factory, there's some fingerprints here. So we want to make sure we get a second coat of paint on the edges. So we'll go ahead and we'll paint the eaves and the edges of this trim and let it dry for half hour or so while they're getting the floor together, and then we'll go ahead and we'll flip this over and paint the other edges. That way when it comes time to put the trim on the building, it's all ready to go and there won't be any cutting in with a brush. Okay, so we got the floor framing screwed together and we're starting to level it up. I just wanted to show you guys, so we always mark out our joists on top of the track. Even though the holes are basically drilled at 2 feet, we always want to make sure that our joist is perfectly centered, so we don't eyeball it. We always mark it out. And then we also have the building, or we have the floor square with the house. We squared off the house, we measured off the house to make sure we're square, and we also made sure that we were right in line with the wall of the house, because that is where the customer wanted it. So now we're going to go ahead and block it up and get it level. Okay, so we got our frame leveled up, we got our blocking in. Blocking's nice and even all the way around. We got our blocking shimmed up so that our steel track is sitting nice and flush. And now we're going to go ahead and start sheeting the floor. Okay, we got our first 2 sheets on. So the way we do this is we put our first sheet on, and then we come over and we're going to put our big piece on the other end to basically stagger it. The reason we do it this way is so that we get a nice tight seam in here, and then we'll go ahead and we'll put this piece in, and then we'll finish up with this piece over here. And over here, I just wanted to show you what we do here is we pre-drill the holes at the butt seams of the plywood. That way we don't get any chipping when we put the screws in. So now we're getting ready to start standing walls. So we got the first wall back, we got it laid down, and we're painting it up before we stand it up. And then we're gonna keep setting walls. Okay, so we got a couple walls up, and I just wanted to point out a few things. So we set this back wall first, and then we set this side wall. So when you bring the side wall in, you want to make sure you got a nice tight seam between the bottom plate of this first wall that we set and this second plate. We got it nice and tight. And then the siding on this wall will get nailed into the framing of this wall on the outside. That's at the bottom, and then at the top, going to be similar. So this framing is part of this wall. This siding runs out beyond it, so we're going to nail this siding into this framing. We want to make sure that our top plates are nice and flush with this framing here, and I'll just show you how they have it nailed. Basically, they shoot 2 nails in through this wall into those top plates, and then down here there's 2 nails into the framing on that wall. And then I just want to show you the fastening on the floor, the screws. This is one of the things we check for when we come out on site. These hex-headed screws, they're gonna go every 8 inches. I know at least here in Florida they got to be no more than 8 inches apart. So we got them screwed across, and then if you notice the door opening, you got to have 2 screws on each side of the door, which they have. And we have 1 more wall to set. Okay, so now we're doing a really important step. We are putting a brace in at the top of the 2 side walls. This is something you want to do before you put your trusses in, and I want to show you. So we have basically have this side nailed, 2x4s right up against the siding, and when you come over to this side, you can see that there's a gap here. That's because this wall is leaning out. So we're going to pull the wall in, and then we're going to nail it so that we have the correct distance at the top of our walls. So you want to hold that up. Jacob, you can pull it in.
Strong master.
A little bit more. Yep, now it's tight. Go ahead and nail it. Okay, good. Now that's going to keep the top of the walls at the correct distance. So when we put our trusses in, it also makes sure that we don't have any kind of a bow in the wall. And also, if we didn't have that brace in there, what would wind up happening is, if the walls were spread, you would have basically a dip in the center of the roof. So that's why we put the brace in. That's a really important step. You should do that on every single building, no matter what size it is. All right. So one thing I forgot to mention about this spreader here is we are going to leave this in until we're completely done on the roof. Plywood, shingles, everything. We want to leave that in, and we'll take this out last. So the next thing I want to show is how we nail our trusses in. So we went ahead and marked out our 2-foot centers, but then we set back 3/4 of an inch so that we can put the truss, the edge of the truss, right on the line, so that we know that this truss is exactly where it needs to be. If you just mark the center, then you would be basically eyeballing it, which we don't want to do. So we have all of our trusses marked out, and when you set it on the mark, what you do is you come out here and just shoot 1 nail through the siding into the truss, and that's going to keep the truss from moving side to side when you go and put your toenails in. So the way we do it, or the way you're supposed to do it, is you're going to put two toenails on one side of the truss, and then 1 toenail on the other side. That's how we do it. So another thing I wanted to show you with the trusses is, wherever your door is, you want to make sure when you're setting your trusses that you look at the trusses first and make sure that you have the nicest edges of the trusses facing towards where the door is. So if you have like waning or a knot, or basically a blemish looking part of the truss, you want it to be on this side, facing away from the door. So that way you have the best appearance on the inside. Okay, so we got all of our roof sheathing on. I just wanted to point out, when you start with your first sheet, you want to make sure the edge of your plywood is even with the edge of the framing, which is also the back side of the siding. So you want to make sure this is even all the way up, and then you're going to go ahead and shoot that off all the way off, or shoot this all the way up with your nails, And then when you get to the other end of the sheet, you can raise it up or down wherever you need to set it. But you always want to nail off going up your gable first. That way you can use your sheet of plywood to basically rack the roof. So we got all the sheeting on both sides, and then we're going to go ahead and we're going to install the sidewall eaves next, and I'll show you that once we get those up. Okay, so when you're getting ready to sit your sidewall eaves, the first thing you want to do is measure from the outside edge of your siding on your end wall all the way across over to the outside edge of your opposite gable wall. You want to get that measurement, and then you're going to go ahead down and measure your eaves to make sure that you have that same measurement. Typically the overhangs are going to be a little bit long, so you may have to trim them, but you want to make sure you trim them on the ground. Use a speed square to make a nice straight mark so you get a nice straight cut. Sometimes you won't have to cut them, but sometimes you will. So it's better to measure it up here first before you bring it over and you try to set it up and realize it's too long. So he is basically, we measured both sides and we have to trim both of them just a little bit, and then we're going to go ahead and set them up, and then I'll show you how we attach them. Okay, so we got our sidewall eaves on. I just want to show you how we lined them up. Basically just use any type of straight edge. Here we use a speed square, put it on the outside of our siding, and then we run it out and then just slide the eave out till it's flush, and then we go ahead and we nail into our blocks. 2x4 blocks are inside the eave. You can see there how we have them nailed, and it's nailed all the way across. And when we get to the other side, you can see that we're flush over here as well. And now the next thing we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to put our gable trim on next. Okay, so I just wanted to get a quick shot of the sidewall eave on, and I just wanted to point out that the eave actually goes on the same angle as the plywood of the roof. It's not going to sit out level this way. It's actually, I just want to make sure everybody understands that the eave has to go on the same angle as the plywood before you nail it. Okay, so we're installing the gable trim right now, and I wanted to show you the best way to do this. You want to always start your gable trim at the bottom here, at the sidewall eave, not at the peak. You want to make sure you line your gable trim up nice and flush with the outside of your sidewall eave, and then the top of the trim is going to be flush with the top of your plywood. So you're going to go ahead and just shoot 2 nails in like this. Don't put any nails in here yet, and then you're going to go to the other side over here, which these guys are doing right now. We're going to line this edge up, shoot 2 nails in it, and then we'll come to the peak and bring the two pieces together, and they'll wind up being flush at the peak. Let me move my ladder over here quick. I can show you. Go ahead and pull those together and just nail them off.
Just like that?
Yep. Okay. So as you can see, the trim is actually a little bit below the peak of the plywood. That's okay. What you don't want to do is spread it apart so that you have a gap here. Let your 2 pieces of trim come together and then nail them off. Then when you're nailing your trim, you have a stud right in the center, so you can shoot nails into the stud. And then basically you got these lines in the siding which are 8 inches apart, so every 16 inches you're going to have a stud. So what you want to do with your nailing, where you have no stud here, you're going to shoot your nail high, and you're going to use these lines as a guide. You're going to go high, and then you're going to go low, right in line with where the stud is right here. So you can shoot a nail low here, high over here, and low over here where the stud is. The reason we do that, because you want to have a stagger pattern on your trim, but you also don't want to have nails poking through, shining on the inside. So that's why we do it that way. Okay, so what we got Dan doing here is painting the trim on the gable prior to putting the drip edge on the roof. You definitely want to do it this way. You don't want to put your drip edge on first, and then, because then you would have to try to cut in with a paintbrush to paint the trim. So you're going to go ahead and paint all the way up and down the gable, as well as this outside face of the sidewall leaf. You want to paint that too. Put your second coat on, and then we're going to do the same thing over on this gable, and we're going to paint that as well before we put the drip edge on. Okay, so the guys have all the synthetic underlayment on, and they're in the process of putting the drip edge on. And just wanted to show you something real quick with the drip edge. So when you put your drip edge on, you don't ever want to have a seam in your drip edge above your door or above your window. And this is a 10-foot long building. So what we did here is we basically put our seam in between the door and the window. And because the customer has like a little screened in area here, they're going to be looking at the shed from this angle. So what you do is you always want to make sure you have your piece overlap away from the door, because when you look at the seam this way, you can barely see it. But if you come back this direction and look at it, the seam is more visible. So you always want to have your overlap away from your door. And then the nail pattern on the drip edge here is basically 4 inches on center all the way around. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and put the gable end vents in, and just wanted to show you a couple things. So you can see I've got a bead of caulking run all the way around the opening, and then I've got the vent right here. This is the top. So what you want to do with these little tabs here is just bend them up just a little bit, each one of them. This is going to help the vent go in easier. So then we're just going to pick it up, bring it up here, and basically we're going to stick the top in first. We're going to push it up, and then the bottom part will just snap right in. And then you just want to make sure you can kind of use the grooves in your siding to make sure it looks nice and straight, that it's not tilted one way or the other, which it looks like it's pretty good right there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just use my finger to wipe this off to get it looking nice and clean. And then after it dries, I'll go ahead and put a little bit of touch-up paint on there. But that's basically how you put those vents in. Okay, so we're getting ready to install a 2x2 window. First step is to go ahead and put a bead of caulking all the way around the window opening. And then we have the 2x2 window here, and we want to make sure that the weep holes on the window are facing down and out towards us. So the window is going to go in just like so. So go ahead and pick that up, and we got 2 pencils sitting on the windowsill. That's going to be a spacer. The inside of the window is going to sit on top of that. Go ahead and just set them in there. Push it in, and then we're going to come on the inside, and you can see we got a pencil underneath both. And then what we're going to do is just make sure that we have pretty much equal spacing on both sides, which looks pretty good right there. Go ahead on the outside and hold that. So we have equal spacing in here. So now we're going to go and fasten the window. So what you're going to do here is the windows have to be screwed in. They got to be screwed in, not nailed. So you're going to come basically 3 inches off the corner and put a screw, and then 3 inches up this way and put a screw. Hold that in there. And then you got to be basically no more than 12 inches apart with your screws. So basically you're probably only going to have 1, 2, 3 screws here, and then same thing on the side, 1, 2, 3, and then so on the top. So we're going to go ahead and put the screws in, and we're going to be using these 2.5-inch screws to go into the wood. So go ahead and put that one in. Hold that on there. I'll hold the window. Go ahead. That screw is going to go right into the window framing. So we're going to go ahead and screw this off, and then I'll take a quick picture when it's all done and screwed off. Okay, so we got the window all screwed off. Just wanted to show you that real quick. And then also, after the window is screwed in, you want to put another bead of caulk across the top of the window, which we already did, and make sure you get some caulking down in the holes. That's just to basically double protect it from water getting in. And then once we put our trim on all the way around, we're going to put one more bead of caulk on the top of the trim as well. Okay, last video of the window. I just wanted to show how we put the trim on, and then we went ahead and we put another bead of caulking across the top. So basically it has like triple protection from water getting in behind it. All right. Okay, just wanted to show you something quick with the anchors we put in. We use auger anchors here in Florida. So just a little tip for you guys, whoever else uses these. You always want to dig down with a set of post hole diggers. Dig down about 6-8 inches, and then when you go to put your run your auger in with your impact wrench, it'll go in so much easier, and it'll go in so much straighter as well. The other thing you want to make sure is that the top of the anchor here, you want to have it flush with the ground level, so that when the bracket goes on, these corners are really sharp. So you want to make sure the bracket is at ground level, because if it's up in the air, it basically sticks out, and it's just like somebody could hit their leg on it. If someone has a kid that's running around the shed, they can hit their ankle or their foot on that sharp edge. So always want to make sure your anchors are down flush with the ground level. All right, cool. Okay, I wanted to show you something real quick with the shingles. We got our books cut and we got them started. So I just wanted to show you the nailing pattern on the shingles. You gotta have 6 nails across, but you want to make sure that the 4 nails that you have in the middle, that you have roughly a 1 foot space in between here, because the next shingle seam is going to be right here, and you don't want to have any nails where there's a seam, kind of like right here. See how there's no nails, and you lift it up, same thing, no nails. You don't want to have nails within 2 inches of your seams, because you could fail an inspection that way and it could leak. So just wanted to make sure to point that out, the nail pattern. So it's basically 1 nail 2 inches off the end, and then you maybe skip a foot and put 4 nails in the middle, and then you can skip another foot here and then put a nail out 2 inches from the end. And then going up the rake here, when you put this nail in, you also want to throw one up top as well. All right. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and put the door in. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna cut the 2x4 bottom plate out of the wall. And what I'll probably do, because it takes a while to install the door, is I'll probably take some pictures, basically step by step as we go, as well as some video. Okay.